Yes, I'm Batman.
I'm Batman.
I'm Batman, Alfred.
I'm Batman.
I am Batman!
I'm Batman.
I'm Batman.
Greetings, Bat Family. Welcome back to Holy BatCast, brought to you by Real Fans for Real Movies. Please visit our website, holybatcast.com. It's where you're going to find episodes of this show, as well as videos and links and merchandise, things like that. You can also find us all over social media on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Just search for Holy BatCast and you will find us. And if you are a fan of the show, would like to help keep the show rolling, we also have a Patreon. You can go to patreon.com/holybatcast. And as always, the biggest of thank yous to all of our patrons who support us and help with the expenses that rise because of running the show. We couldn't do it without you. And again, thank you so much. We're also part of the Real Fans Podcast Network, which includes other shows like Real Fans for Real Movies, or RF4RM. On the latest episode of that, we reviewed Diet Batman, or Black Panther. We've also got Disorder, every Disney film, where we're looking at every Disney animated feature in order, and we just released an episode of 101 Dalmatians. And then there is Please Rewind, the RF for RM retro show, where Jamie, Guy, and Tim talk about older movies, and they just talked about True Romance, if I remember correctly. So check out all those shows at rf4rm.com, or you can just search for them by name wherever you get your podcasts. As always, I'm your host, Andy DiGenova. Hello. Welcome back. Glad you're here. And if you'd like to follow me when I'm not talking about Batman, you can do that on Twitter or on Instagram just by searching my name, Andy DiGenova. Now, this episode's going to be a little something different. We're going off of the well-traveled path, and we're talking about something random, but that's the fun of it. We're going to talk about the 1980 Batman miniseries, The Untold Legend of the Batman. As always, joining me, I've got my partner in crime, the Robin to my Batman, the Penguin to my Joker, the Bat Cycle to my Batmobile, the Batcopter to my Batplane. I don't know. I'll just keep making things up. Anyway, it's Jamie Drewley. You know him. Hey, Jamie, how's it going?
Oh, it's good, man. The sun shines out. The snow's melted. It's almost like spring's here.
The sunshine is out way too early, but I feel like it's always up too early.
You realize the sun comes out, 6 a.m. most days? I know you don't know what 6 a.m.
I've heard
looks
that.
Like,
I've heard the legends, but I don't want to confirm it on my own. But it's okay. I still have my supply of pumpkin coffee, so that is helping me record earlier than normal this week.
Oh, man, I ran out of my pumpkin coffee like 2 weeks ago. I'm depressed about it.
Oh, yeah. I cleaned out Target on their clearance shelf. And plus, during the week, I drink Works coffee, so my home coffee lasts a lot longer.
Oh, my work coffee is terrible, so I won't touch it.
It's not the best, but it's free and whatever.
Sometimes free is better than good.
Often, especially when it comes to food and drink.
Right.
Yeah, but anyway, it's good to be back. Ready to talk a little Batman.
I like Batman. I don't know if I've ever told you that, but I like Batman.
You've never mentioned it, so I'm glad to hear that, because otherwise this would make for a very awkward and odd episode.
It doesn't seem to me I would have been on this many episodes if that wasn't the case.
I know. Could you imagine? Bat who?
Man-Bat. I thought we were talking about Man-Bat.
Yes, I'm a Man-Bat enthusiast, but I don't know the first thing about Batman. So I like, what's the guy's name in Hanna-Barbera? Blue Falcon. Let's start a Blue Falcon podcast.
Wow, that's a deep pull.
I know. He was my favorite as a kid because he was a superhero. I knew nothing about him other than
Dino Mutt? Is that who rolled with him?
Yeah, and he hung out with Dino Mutt.
Yeah.
Blue Falcon and Dino Mutt, they are prime for a reboot. I'd buy it. It's Hanna-Barbera. They're owned by WB. Blue Falcon could go on an adventure with Batman.
I'd watch that.
Yeah.
I'd read that.
And now that I'm saying it out loud, I think I'm just a sucker for anything blue because, of course, of my love for Blue Devil. I just like blue superheroes, I think.
Yeah, I think you might be onto something there.
Devils, bats. Yeah. Blue Leonardo was my favorite Ninja Turtle. Billy was my favorite Power Ranger. If they were blue, they were my favorite.
We've gotten to the bottom of something here.
We figured it out. Mystery solved. That's the end of the episode. Thanks for joining us, everybody. But yeah, this is something we've been wanting to talk about. Well, I've been wanting to talk about, and I'm forcing you to talk about it because that's how it goes. But you do always bug me to talk more comic books, and I was like, great, how about a 38-year-old one? Let's talk about that comic book.
I have no objection to this. It's just not a story that I remembered.
Yeah, but I don't remember how it came back up. I want to say it came back up relatively recently, like in the last year or so. And I was like, oh my God, like I loved that book. I loved The Untold Legend of the Batman. I haven't read it since I was a kid. That would be a cool one to do an episode on. So I made you go buy it. And then I think we've both been sitting on our copies for a year while we were waiting for the right time to review it. And then this week, it was kind of a slow news week, not much else going on. And I was like, hey, seems like as good a week as any, right? And here we are. Plus,
I figured for sure since you finally booked this episode that something major, like an Aquaman trailer, was going to happen or something. But no, it stayed quiet. And honestly, I'm kind of good with that. I'm a little. Well, I guess we kind of got a Flash thing, but yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, the directors we already knew were probably going to direct The Flash. Confirmed on Twitter yesterday that it's happening is their word. It's happening with a gif of The Flash. So, yeah, that's great, but I'm not going to talk about that for an hour.
No.
We could try.
I'm really glad that nuclear bad news that was allegedly hanging out there never seemed to rear its head. So
that's ridiculous.
I have to mention though, and it's petty of me, and I realize it's petty, but I still find it funny that The Rap and John Campea got into a mini Twitter war over that, and nobody ever said what the bad news allegedly was.
Oh, no.
At least Campea never confirmed it. All he said was he never said what they said. He said he didn't say.
Yeah, that's the internet for you. The fact that you can make headlines by going, I heard something bad, but I'm not telling you.
Yeah.
That's news.
So anyway, this comic book.
I want no part of it. I want no part of it, Jamie. I want to talk about comic books from 38 years ago about Batman because they make me happy. That's all I do. I don't ask for much.
Grab yourself a box of Twinkies and let's get on it.
A box of Twinkies. You should probably explain why that's the case. I mean, maybe some people will get it, but I wouldn't have if you hadn't explained it to me.
Yeah, so we were kind of messaging back and forth yesterday as we were both reading this, apparently about it at the same time. Of course, he reads digital because he's a communist, and I read, actual, floppy print stuff.
Tavadish.
But if you watch this Twitter discussion we had, his images are far clearer than mine because my pages are old and faded and yellow and
beautiful spick and span HD.
Right. So I'm flipping through here, and we figured out that the real loss of digital is you lose all these ads that are in here, such as O.J. Simpson selling cowboy boots to a couple of white kids, and the Twinkie thing is actually.
I wish he sold gloves to go with the boots. How good would that have been?
In the first issue, there's actually two of them within about 5 pages. One he's selling cowboy boots, and the other one he's hawking. Looks like cleats of some sort.
Wow.
But anyway, the Twinkie thing comes from these little Hostess ads that are in each one of them. And the cool thing is, instead of recycling the same ones, you got a different one in each of the 3 issues. So the first one was Flash against the Destroyer, and he defeats him with Twinkies and Fox.
Perfect.
And then the second one is Green Lantern at I don't know if he's at the Olympics or what, but he's watching bobsledding. And the bobsled is apparently loaded with Hostess Twinkies, which why in the hell bobsled is loaded with Hostess Twinkies? I don't know, but I ain't even mad at this.
It was my bobsled.
This is the bobsled I want to ride in.
Right.
And
maybe it was the Jamaican bobsled because they had the munchies.
That very well may be. And the third one was a Batgirl one. And there were various other ads in there too, but this is why I keep referencing the Twinkies, because I haven't been able to get Twinkies off my mind since reading these last night.
That's awesome. They've become the McDonald's for Santa Claus the movie. Now it's Twinkies in the Untold Legend of the Batman.
Absolutely. And apparently I'm very impressionable when it comes to food. Who would have guessed?
That's what I said. The DC Comics, they know their audience.
Right on.
Yeah. So anyway, let's turn the clock back to 1980 and talk about, I would say, I don't know if I'd say a landmark miniseries. It was for me. I can't speak for the rest of the world, but for me, it was a landmark miniseries. But at least an extremely, I would say, almost influential miniseries of Batman. So let's take a look at the Untold Legend of the Batman.
Please look out, thugs beware, killers watch out, wrongdoers don't dare. In the deepest dark of night, he waits for the danger. One man's holy flight, evil's only true avenger.
So as I said, The Untold Legend of the Batman was from 1980. It was a 3-issue miniseries and written by Len Wein and penciled mostly by Jim Aparo. And I don't know if I'm saying Aparo correct.
That's how I say it. So.
All right, well, cool. Then agreed. Motion carried.
And apparently John Byrne contributed on the first issue and not the final 2.
Yeah, John Byrne assisted with the first, but the rest was Jim Aparo, so it was like, maybe 80% Jim. I'm just guessing. Covers by Jose Luis Garcia Lopez, who Mark Hughes and I talked about a few episodes ago, because it was someone who I didn't really know his name, but now that I do know his name, I'm seeing it pop up everywhere with all these things that he did over the years, and these covers are no different. These covers are just as iconic, I think, as you can get. And so it was cool to see that he had done those. But yeah, it was just 3 issues. And it was apparently the very first miniseries starring Batman.
Really?
Yeah. According to Wikipedia, which would never lie to me.
No, that's hard-cased fact there.
Yeah, you can take it to the bank. So yeah, apparently the first miniseries starring Batman, The Untold Legend of the Batman. I wasn't able to dig up much backstory on what prompted the miniseries and whose idea it was and all that, but I have theories, but I can't really confirm those because it doesn't seem to really be out there. And the reason I wanted to review this book is, number one, because I think it's great. Spoilers. Number 2, as a kid, this book was like my Batman Bible. I got this book because if you sent in the proof of purchase of Batman the Serial, you got a reprint of this miniseries. And so I got those in the mail, and I felt like I waited ages for them to come back in the day where it said 4 to 6 weeks, which usually meant 8 to 12.
Oh, yes.
And so I remember sending away for them and then finally getting them and then poring over them over and over and over again. And I think that at the time, it was really well regarded, but I do feel like, especially more recently, it's been somewhat forgotten. And I think that that's a shame because, again, I really enjoy it. And so I would like to shed a light on it so more people will seek it out and try to enjoy it now. Because, yeah, I feel like it should probably be regarded higher, in the great Batman stories. Because for me as a kid, it was really important. And so, yeah, I just thought, it'd be fun to go in the Wayback Machine and check this thing out. It was funny, though, because I had not read it since I was little. And so revisiting it, it was amazing how it all came flooding back to me once I actually started reading it again. But yeah, this was arguably one of the best cereal prizes ever, is by eating that not great Batman cereal. I was able to get these 3 issues of The Untold Legend of the Batman, and they were smaller. They were not full size. They were like little mini versions.
Was that with the Batman 89 cereal? Or
yeah.
What was that?
Yeah, Batman 89. So, and on the cereal box, they showed the cover, the first cover, and then I think the other 2 issues were kind of fanned out behind the first cover. And so I just remember seeing the image of the Riddler on that first cover and going, oh my God, it's a Riddler story. And then I get the books, and that's not at all what it is. But
yeah, that's pretty friggin' far.
I was misled by the covers.
It is a great cover. I mean, all three of them are great covers, but that first one especially jumps out.
Oh, it's amazing.
3 is recognizable to me because there was some sort of a novelization or something, as I recall, written of this, and the cover of issue number 3 was the cover of that novelization.
Ah, okay.
And 2 just wasn't familiar. I mean, just briefly, my story with it is I had issue number 1. I'd had it since I was very young. I mean, I can't even tell you how long. It was one of the victims of my basement flood, so I did lose it in that. So I had to go out and replace these books to read them for this.
R.I.P.
Exactly. And I never had issue number 2. I don't remember ever having issue number 3. But oddly enough, I remembered almost all the details of 1 as I was going through it. I mean, I was very hazy on it. I didn't remember much, but as I was reading it, it kind of came back to me. And number 2 was definitely the first time I'd ever read that. But somehow number 3 was really familiar to me also. So at some point, I must have read number 3.
So you read 1 and 3, but not 2?
Apparently. And I don't remember ever owning 3, so I don't remember why I would have read it and not owned it, because I'm really weird about reading other people's stuff. Like, I don't go to libraries. I have to buy my own copies of books and stuff. I'm weird about that. So
Interesting.
just strange. But I mean, the details were familiar to me of that 3rd issue somehow.
Yeah, I guess at some point you read it. Well, couldn't have been digitally, knowing
It
you.
certainly was not digital. No.
But yeah, I don't remember why it came back up, but I was like, oh, that's something I should own digitally anyway. And so it gave me the excuse to rebuy it. And it is pretty easy to find digitally now. I think you do have to buy the 3 issues separately, but I think they're $1.99 each. So you can get the whole thing for less than $6. And, as we mentioned earlier, the artwork is cleaned up and beautiful, so that's another big perk of picking it up digitally. I think if you're going to go to try and seek out the physical copies, you might have a little bit of a treasure hunt. Jamie, how hard was it for you to dig up the physical ones?
I walked into my local comic book shop. I said, do you happen to have you can't find this on trade anywhere. I mean, apparently they either never made a trade of this or it's been out of print for eons, so there's no combined trade paperback format of it, which would normally be how I'd read something like this. So I didn't even bother asking him about that because I scoured the internet looking for it and couldn't find it. But I walked in, I said, hey, do you happen to have the Untold Legend of Batman? He's like, which one? I said, I need all of them. He said, okay, so I have all 3 over here. So it was just as simple as that. So
well, that's good.
My number 1 was a 9.0 grade. My number 2 was a 9.2, and my number 3 was an 8.5. And all said and done, the 3 issues cost me $18.50. So
not too
I mean,
bad.
they're not like dirt cheap dollar bin bargains, but they're not like hyper expensive books either.
Yeah, that's good to know. And I could have just dug up my old cereal box versions because I still have them, but it's just easier to just download them than to go digging into my long boxes. So apparently it was put into a trade, but it seems like that was also back in 1989. So that's probably why it's hard to find, is that if it hasn't been reprinted since then yeah, there's probably not too many floating out there.
Right. And we seem to have gotten some feedback from people regarding this. So there must be at least a cult following to this, but obviously it's not on the level of a Dark Knight Returns, a Year One, any of those types of stories from, that Bronze Age or modern age stuff. I mean,
yeah, exactly.
It seems strange to me that this one got as lost as it did.
Exactly. It's so odd to me because, again, especially in the 80s, it felt like it was a much bigger deal, and then it somehow just kind of kept fading into the background. But you're right. Once we tweeted about it yesterday, we saw a lot of people respond and go, oh my God, I love that one. It was one of my favorites. How cool. Like I was impressed by how many people recognized it and had fond memories of it.
Right. And I
So I
wonder,
think
maybe,
that's good.
Given the time that this came out, I don't know my Super Friends timeline or anything, but I wonder if the popularity of the Super Friends show would have triggered something like this, because more people would have been curious about getting into Batman from kind of the ground level, maybe.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I mean, 1980 is kind of smack dab in the middle of all of the Super Friends stuff. Super Friends started in, I want to say, the early 70s. But
Was it that soon?
Yeah, the earliest version. But then it went well into the 80s. There were so many iterations of Super Friends in the 70s and 80s. And so, yeah, this is kind of, I think, I mean, it was probably in the later third, but yeah, because of the cartoons, and even probably because of the 60s show in syndication, I could imagine this being like, oh, you want a Cliff's Notes of Batman and his mythology? Here's a miniseries. Here's a 3-issue miniseries. And I guess first I'll say we'll give you a spoiler warning before we get into too many details, because I do think that, again, this isn't super readily available. It's not something like The Dark Knight Returns where every Batman fan has read it. But again, I recommend that you do seek it out and read it. It's a quick and easy read. That was another thing about this week, is like, oh, this one won't take too long to read, so we can review it on the show. So it's a pretty quick and easy read, but it's still a really fun one. Definitely really set in that time of 1980 and where Batman was as a character at that moment. But we'll talk, I think, in general terms first. But just in case you're going to go seek it out and you don't want to know the ending or something, we'll give you a spoiler warning before we get into any of those specifics. So just, you can listen to this, just us chatting about it at first, and then if you do get worried about spoilers, we'll make sure that we warn you in advance. But it is a 38-year-old book, so there you go. I also think that if you start reading it and you're already a Batman fan, I think you can figure out the ending. I don't know. We'll see.
I think maybe somebody could have figured out a better ending, but we'll get to that when we get to it.
Oh, all right. Anyway, so I guess just from a very broad picture here, it does feel like someone, and again, I don't know whose idea this was, I couldn't figure that out, but someone, whether it's Len Wein, whether it was someone who was running DC Comics, but they were like, hey, people need a Cliff's Notes on the world of Batman, and let's do a miniseries that's exactly that. Because yes, it's a story, but it's a story built as an excuse to give you the origin of every major Batman character. Because that's really what it exists for. It's like, oh, this way you'll know kind of a little bit about everyone, and then you can go read our regular comics and you won't be confused. So they did that. They do that within the framework of a story, but again, it's mostly just an excuse to give you abbreviated origins for everybody. Not that I'm complaining, because again, as a kid, when this came out, or when I got it in 1989, I would have been 10 or 11, and I knew about Batman, but not, I hadn't dove too deep into comics yet. So this, again, became the base of a lot of my knowledge as a kid of Batman. So there were things in this that I never forgot, because I was like, oh, no, of course, Batman did this because of that. And I just took it as like holy gospel because I knew it from the Untold Legend of the Batman. And, something else we'll get into is how some of that has evolved and changed over the years. But at the time, it was pretty well cemented because of this book. And I also think that was probably another reason for the book, is it was almost like they were taking all the different versions of the origins and stories of all these characters and kind of bringing all those threads together into one definitive one.
Well, that's actually what I was going to ask you in your research, because I did no research because homework sucks and I refuse to do it. And that's been a running thing with me my whole life, so don't take that personally. But was this book ever at any point considered canon for Batman?
I think so.
Because there were some pretty serious variations from what, the post year one Dark Knight Returns kind of era of that mid to late 80s kind of established form. Well,
and I think that's exactly it, because this was 1980. Those came later. And so in 1980, I think this was as definitive as you got with the backstories of Batman and Robin and Alfred and Commissioner Gordon, etc. So I think that at that time, yes, this was like, no, this is the history, this is canon. But because comic books, over the years that followed, a lot of those details and things changed or shifted or got retconned or got ignored. And so now when you look back, there are certain things where you go, oh yeah, of course that's how it went. And there are other things where you're like, whoa, I don't remember anything about this, because those were just pieces of the mythology that, you know, future creators decided they didn't like, or they wanted to change, or they wanted to put their own spin on it. So some of that got lost. But I do believe that in 1980, yes, this was canon. This was the way the story went. And it's just evolved since then.
Interesting.
So yeah, like
I guess it's also interesting. I mean, if you and I don't know that this is actually the mark of where it happened, but if you use year one as the kind of the bookend of where the evolution of the current or modern Batman kind of started, that was only what, 8 years after this, 7, 8 years after this.
Yeah.
So it didn't stick around very long if this established the canon during that. But I mean, they're always monkeying around with things in comic books. So,
well, but that's just it. Is I think that, you know, this almost feels like the cherry on top of, it wouldn't be quite 50 years, but of 40 years of history. You know, it was like this was the moment where they took 40 years of history and canonized it all and tried to make it all make sense. And then in the 80s, especially in the mid to late 80s, with Frank Miller and you know, the different creators who started getting their hands on things, like Denny O'Neil, that was when all of comics were starting to be rethought and redefined and reshaped and becoming something very different. And so there was this huge leap in evolution in comic books in the mid to late 80s that left a lot of this behind. I don't even know if that was intentional. It wasn't like, oh, we're going to ditch that. It's more like, how do we do something new that's going to hook more people, or you know, show them this isn't just for kids. So I think that was more a timing thing than anything. I don't think it was like a conscious, like, oh, all that past history doesn't matter. It was more like, well, you know, people are losing interest in DC Comics. How do we redefine it? And then that, because of that, there are pieces of this mythology that just kind of gets overlooked or ends up disappearing. Yeah,
I think you're probably onto the right track there.
So yeah, it's really interesting because I read this so many times in 1989 when I couldn't get enough Batman, and it served as the base of my knowledge of a lot of these things. And so for me, this was the true story of all these guys. And so then, as you know, in future years, you see certain things and that contradict it, and I'm like, wait, that's not right. That's not how it went. But it was this and The Man Who Falls were kind of my two, what I really went back to all the time on Batman's origin, and then, you know, all the other characters we see here.
Right. Yeah, I'm with you.
All right, great. Yeah, because even The Killing Joke came 1988. So this was even pre-Killing Joke, but there's still parts, you know, there's still elements of that in this. So it's interesting.
Yeah, it is. I mean, there's certainly a lot of things that were familiar throughout this, while simultaneously a lot of things going, what? Seriously? You're going, what? Huh? I mean, are we over the wall yet, or are we still?
Not yet, but
okay.
I mean, we can just give our overall impressions. Now that you have read it, overall spoiler-free impressions. You know, I've just been kind of talking about what I think the purpose of it was, and how it is a snapshot in time in 1980 and things like that. But we haven't, you know, obviously I really like the book. I had less of an issue with the ending, but that's also because I've known the ending for almost 30 years now. So I'm like, I just was like, oh yeah, that's what it is.
The ending is actually what triggered in me. It's like, I know this ending. Like, I don't think anybody else ever used that ending in another comic I would have read. And I know the ending that they used here. So I was like, that's I had to have read that book at some point.
Right.
But,
so overall, I have a very positive reaction to it. Again, there's some really weird mythology things in here that I will call out that I went, whoa, wait, forgot about that. But overall, I still think it's a great read. I still think much of it continues to hold up. And so I still think it is worth reading. It is a good crash course in a lot of these characters. And so, and I think the artwork for me is second to none. I think the artwork is amazing in this miniseries and is almost as good as it gets. I can't think of a more classic and iconic look to all of these characters. And so just going through, looking at just the visuals, I was tickled by them. I think like over the past few years, I took Jim Aparo for granted in the 80s because I was so used to seeing it. But now so much time has passed and I've seen so many other artists take on Batman that when I go back to Jim Aparo, I appreciate him that much more into just how beautiful his work is. And so seeing all of these classic characters as translated by Jim Aparo made me incredibly happy too.
Yeah, I'll definitely co-sign with the art. In fact, I'll point out specifically, you tweeted out page 13 when you started that thing yesterday about reading this. And, you know, there's some really good splash pages in here. I mean, like outstanding stuff. But
oh, completely. Like there's some splash pages in here that I'm like, oh God, I forgot about this. And again, as a kid, I just poured over them because, you know, they put all these little cameos in the background and stuff. And so I just looked at these splash pages for way too long, just trying to figure out who everyone was. So awesome.
Yeah, I mean, if you could name all of them, you're a much more dedicated fan than me, because I can name the majority, but there are some that I simply don't have a clue.
Oh yeah, I can't. Even now, I can't name them all.
The one that looks like Ghost Rider, I have no idea who that is.
I don't either. I want to say it's the Flaming Skull.
I don't know who it is right underneath him that's wearing the red and yellow. I don't know who the Fing Fang Foom looking guy is right underneath him.
The Mandarin.
Is that who that is?
No, the Mandarin's Iron Man.
Yeah, duh.
but he looks like the Mandarin.
So yeah, I mean,
there's a lot in here where I'm like, yeah, I don't know who that is. I don't know who the Loki guy with the eyepiece is.
I thought Magog, but this would have been way too early for him, wouldn't it?
I don't know.
So yeah, obviously. But anyway, the reason I brought that up is page 12. Actually, the bottom half of page 12 is extremely familiar to me because I have seen this floating around like the internet when you were talking about the superstitious and cowardly lot, and that bottom panel where Batman's in the costume on the rooftop with the moon in the background. That to me is poster worthy. If I could get a poster of that in a really high grade definition, I would definitely hang that up on a wall. But so yeah, the artwork is just absolutely fantastic throughout this book.
Yeah, there are so many panels like that where I was like, hey, could you give me a version minus the word balloons where I can just use this as, you know, my phone wallpaper?
Right. You know, everybody's got the surprised, you know, dashes coming out of their eyes, and it's very much a product of its time as far as the art is concerned, but I think it's really top tier for that style.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and this creative team is nothing to sneeze at, you know. Len Wein and John Byrne and Jim Aparo, like, you know, they
Legends.
were the all-stars back then.
There's no other way to say it. They're legendary.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that in itself would have made me believe that this book would have been a more solid institution than it seems to be versus a cult following to it.
Yeah.
But, you know, overall, I think the story is very good. I think it's very readable. You know, it's heavy on words, but with the amount of detail they're pouring into, you know, 60 pages or whatever the total count was between the three books, you know, you've got to get the detail across. And I think they do a magnificent job of it. I think it's paced very well in doing so. I don't think there's any part of it that drags at all. And there's a lot of really interesting takes on what they do with things. Some I agree with, some I don't. But, you know, overall, I think they really accomplished what they set out to do in very grand form.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with you. And I do think that it's funny. My expectations when I ordered them from the cereal box was that it was just going to be a normal story, or again, because of that first cover, I thought it was going to be like Batman and Robin taking on the Joker, Penguin, and the Riddler, kind of a comic book version of the Batman 66 movie or something.
Right.
And then when I got it and realized that's not what it was at all, at the time, I don't say I was disappointed, but I was just a little confused because I was like, oh, wait, this is more about telling the backstories of a lot of characters than it is about telling one story in the present. But looking back at it, I'm like, no, God, they made the right call. This is the perfect thing to send to kids who are eating their cereal to give you some knowledge about this world and get you hooked into the world. And so, yeah, I think that looking back, it was a very smart choice, and it was a smart book to make for that reason alone.
Yeah, I think that's very fair and very apt.
Yeah. So, okay, we'll jump over the wall because I don't know what's considered a spoiler at this point. But but again, I do recommend that you guys go seek this out. You can't beat the price digitally, and if you want to go find it physically, well, good on you. Jamie will be very proud of you. I say make it easy on yourself and just download the thing. But it is worth checking out. Really a fun read, and I think that both of us recommend that you do read it. But if you want to, keep yourself fresh, you might want to pause here, go check out the Untold Legends of Batman, and then come back. But if you've already read it or you haven't read it in a long time, and you want to be reminded or whatever, we're just gonna speak freely about everything at this point. So you have been warned. Spoilers will abound from this point forward. So, I mean, starting at the very, very, very beginning, because it's one of those things that, because of how important this book was to me, it was something I always knew as a fact, but it was something that I feel like really got ignored for a long time, is the fact that Thomas Wayne was, quote unquote, the first Batman. And so this piece of history of Thomas Wayne's original Batman costume, to me, always was such a big deal only because of this book. And then it was something that I feel like was never mentioned again until Batman the Brave and the Bold. So that's the other thing I will say is, who else must love this book is the people who did Batman the Brave and the Bold, because Chill of the Night is lifted almost directly from this book.
Yeah. Now, was that before or after Flashpoint? I can't place my timeline. Flashpoint was probably, 2010 or 11?
Yeah.
So I wonder when the date of the Brave and the Bold episode would have been.
I'm not sure.
I only say that because, that's the only other time, speaking in comic form, that I can recall Thomas Wayne being mentioned as ever being in a bat costume.
Right. Well, and even that's a very different thing.
It is, but you kind of have to wonder if I'm not even sure who wrote Flashpoint, or if it only was it Johns.
It was Jeff Johns, and Chill of the Night was in 2010, so they were kind of around the same time. Yeah. So I want to say Flashpoint was around that same time.
That's probably right, because Flashpoint essentially led into New 52, didn't it?
Yeah, and that was 11.
That was 11, yeah. So anyway, I kind of feel like maybe Johns was a fan of this book and kind of acknowledged this Thomas Wayne and the Batman thing and kind of got inspiration to make Thomas Wayne the Batman in Flashpoint. Mm-hmm. That's purely speculation on my part, but I kind of feel like that. Because, Thomas kind of breaks people off some while he's in that costume.
Yeah, right. Even though he was untrained. So yeah, when I first read this, I went, wow, I didn't know that Batman's dad was also Batman. And then you actually read the context and you're like, okay, not really, but they wrote in that inspiration into Bruce's past. And I love the design of the Thomas Wayne Batman costume.
It's very much more true Bat-like than what most of the Batman costumes I've seen have been.
Yeah, I think it's
particularly
so
the
cool.
cowl or the mask.
But yeah, this idea that, when Bruce was young, Thomas and Martha went to a costume party and the theme was flying creatures. And so Thomas wore a Batman costume or a costume of a bat, if you will.
And Martha was a butterfly.
Yeah. And that always kind of just stayed with Bruce subconsciously until he became Batman. I always thought that was really cool. And again, it's not a piece of history you see acknowledged all that often. But I love it. And I love how that Thomas Wayne Batman costume almost continues on as a through line throughout the entire story. It plays an important role. It kicks off the story because it was supposed to be in a case in the Batcave, and it comes back to Batman shredded with a threatening note of, I'm going to destroy you like I destroyed this costume. And then it continues to come back. We understand the history of the costume. Bruce himself dons it when he faces... It's when he faces Moxon, right? Not Joe Chill.
Yes.
So Bruce himself dons it in the past. I like the way they wrote in how his normal Batman costume kind of got destroyed in the fight, and so he had to put on his father's Batman costume. And then it really comes into play again at the end as a way to kind of snap Bruce out of it, if you will.
Well, I'm flipping through the pages here. Maybe it was Chill instead of well, no.
No, it was Moxon. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. Okay.
So yeah, like when he's Joe Chill, he's still Batman. And this scene is directly out of Chill of the Night, where he confronts Joe Chill and he reveals who he is. And it's one of those things where you're like, how's he ever going to get out of this one? And Joe Chill immediately runs to a bunch of other a bunch of other crooks and says, oh, I accidentally created the Batman and now he's after me. And they're like, you created the Batman. Get him, boys. And I'm like, well, that's convenient. And so, in Chill of the Night, it's the same thing, except it's not just a bunch of nameless, faceless crooks. It's all the supervillains. They all turn on him because, like, you created the Batman? Without once going, well, who is he? So I always thought that was convenient.
Well, I mean, in the case of the supervillains, we do know they're criminally insane anyway, so maybe they wouldn't be thinking all that clearly.
Yeah. But anyway, so I was always amused by that. But yeah, so like you get in-depth origin definitely for Batman, including his parents, including the death of his parents, and then including how he eventually becomes Batman and then finds justice for his parents with going after Joe Chill and Moxon. And one thing I loved about this, especially this first issue, is early on, there's a certain point where he says, I was all cried out, so I just stood there and said goodbye to my parents in silence. And he says something about, or is it, maybe it's after he makes the oath. Was it after he makes the oath where he says, I haven't shed a tear in their memory since?
I think it might be after the oath. I'm trying to get back to it now.
Yeah.
No, I don't.
No,
see
it was after he said goodbye. It wasn't even at the oath. Apparently, he didn't shed a tear. He was just
there. It is page
too angry.
6. It's
so
at the funeral.
Yeah, at the funeral.
At the funeral, I was all cried out, so I simply stood there and bid silent farewell to the two people I love most in all the world. I have not shed a single tear in their memory since.
So, I love that. I think that's like so powerful and amazing. And then we get more of the journey of Bruce becoming Batman, but at the very end, he's trying to figure out the whole mystery is, who's after him, who knows all of his secrets, that they would be able to shred his father's costume. They'd be able to get into the Batcave. Like, who would understand how to get to Bruce this way? And that gives them the framework for every character to go, well, I remember how I got involved in all this, and tell us about it. But then I think it's just such a powerful ending to this first issue of when he hasn't, he's off to try and figure out who did this. And it's just that beautiful shot and drawing of a single tear going down Batman's face. And it said, he hasn't shed a single tear in his parents' memory until now.
Yeah.
I just love that.
That was a super strong panel right there.
That's so good. But speaking of like I guess, we'll talk about this first issue first, but some of the things, like some of the pieces of mythology that have been lost throughout the years, was the fact that Bruce was taken in by his Uncle Philip. I don't remember Uncle Philip, but I have an Uncle Philip. So I was like, oh, how nice. And that he was cared for by Uncle Philip's housekeeper, Mrs. Chilton. And Mrs. Chilton was actually the mother of Joe Chill. So, and that was something where I'm like, wow, this has completely been forgotten. I've not heard anyone mention this since 1980, is the fact that Joe Chill's mother actually helped take care of Bruce.
Yeah, that was completely lost on me. And even having read this book some time ago, I did not remember that detail at all.
I know, it was crazy. And I remembered it as soon as I read it again. I went, oh my God, yeah, I forgot that like that was a thing. This also, I think, was one of those times where, sometimes the murder of the Weins is random, and it's just that Joe Chill is just a run-of-the-mill crook, and a cook. He also, he makes a great casserole, but a run-of-the-mill crook who just randomly kills these Weins in a mugging. And then sometimes it's part of like a greater conspiracy. And in this version, it's part of a greater conspiracy. It's the guy that the guy that Thomas sent away after that costume party, getting revenge on Thomas by hiring Joe Chill to kill him. So which I think was also Moxon. I don't know why. So
I actually wonder if that thing with Mrs. Chilton was ever picked up at any point after this book, because I haven't read much between where this book would have taken place and, say, Dark Knight Returns, and even that I probably didn't read till 87 or 88. But I do like the acknowledgement that Alfred gives there on page 6, where he's explaining in his own, inner monologue there, in her own fashion, the dear woman has more than made amends for her son's heinous crime. He doesn't want Bruce to ever know that this is the mother of the person who killed his parents.
Right.
And I don't know of any point where that arc is ever picked up, because one would assume Batman would eventually have to figure that out, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't recall that ever being touched on again. So somebody with better comic book knowledge than me is going to have to explain whether or not that particular story idea ever came to fruition outside of that page right there.
Exactly. I've never heard it referenced in my 30 plus years of comic book reading other than in this book.
Which is another reason I had to ask whether or not this book was considered official canon, because they do tend to play around with things like that.
Well, and again, I feel like, again, this is them trying to tie all the threads into one single narrative. Mm-hmm. And that's probably one of them. And maybe that was a Len Wein addition of just adding his own spin to things. And it was just one that never took. A lot of these, I think, remain pretty valid. Again, it is still Joe Chill. Depending on what you read, sometimes Joe Chill is not hired. Sometimes he is. In this one, he is, because it makes for a better arc of Bruce going back and getting justice for his parents. They mentioned Leslie Tompkins in this one. And she doesn't get a lot of play, but again, they talk about how she was, one of the people who was there for Bruce right after the murders. And the other thing that I think is so interesting, and this is jumping to issue 2, but also here, as we're talking about this, Uncle Philip takes over Bruce's care, because in this version, Alfred doesn't come until Bruce is already Batman. And
okay. I kind of want to get my negative stuff out of the way, because I don't want to sound like I'm pounding on this book, because I really do enjoy it. There's just a couple things I just simply, that they don't sit well with me. That being one of them. That actually probably above the other things that I'm going to have gripes about. I don't care for that at all, because I've always had it in my mind that Alfred essentially raised Bruce after his parents were gone. That's the canon that I've always been familiar with. That's how I've always related Batman and Alfred's relationship is basically like one of father and son, not where Bruce is a full-grown man whose butler shows up at the front door one day and says, "Hey, my dad just died, and I made a promise to him that I'd live my life as essentially an indentured servant. So here I am. This is what I'm going to do for you." And they establish Alfred as the kind of the badass character prior to that, because he was serving in World War II and helping free the people from Nazi occupation and whatnot. And, we've often talked on this show about how much we like the idea that Alfred is capable of handling himself, if you will. And this does not shy away from that. This may be the earliest recorded thing of Alfred being that type of a character that I can recall. I mean, there may be something before it I can't think of, but
it is interesting, because that's considered a more modern take on Alfred, but to see it set up as early as this was actually kind of cool. I was like, oh wow, like that's always been a thought. And that's why even over the years when Alfred would stitch up Bruce or whatever, I'd always go, oh well, yeah, he fought in the war, and it was because of this.
Yeah. So, I mean, I appreciated that element of it. I don't like Alfred being inserted into Bruce's life that late into. I mean, Alfred certainly shouldn't have predated Robin. And again, these are all my personal hangups with it. I don't think there's anything really wrong with it as far as the story and the way it's presented. Just me and my own ideas of what the Batman Alfred relationship should be. Alfred should have been there basically from the beginning.
So what you're saying is this isn't your Alfred?
No, it's not.
It's not my Alfred.
And I don't want to sound like those people that I complain about that are bitching about things just because they don't go the way that they should. So as I said, in the context of the story as they're telling, it's fine. I just would have preferred something different.
No, I don't disagree with you. I think what's interesting is I think most comic book writers, or even TV or movie writers would agree with you too, because that's why it stood out so much in this book. Because it's like, ever since then, it's like, oh no, Alfred was there when the Waynes died and took care of Bruce from that point on. So poor Uncle Philip got written out of continuity.
It's okay. He had his nephew from Philadelphia move in not long after that. So.
Oh, good. Yeah, Uncle Philip is in the comic book version of the big Times Square station in Wreck-It Ralph, like Q*bert begging for scraps. That's what Uncle Philip's doing in the comic book. He's like, "Oh, I'm not part of continuity anymore. Can you spare a meal?" But yeah, so it like. I agree with you, because Alfred is that surrogate father. I do feel like that works better for the story. And so I don't know if prior to this, Alfred did always come later, or if that was just this version. I don't know. Again, I'm sure there's some comic book encyclopedia person who would know, but I think it does say something that has not remained the case, that ever since then, Alfred always pretty much is there for the whole ride.
Right. The other thing I kind of want to get out of the way, because it's really more of a nitpick thing than, again, in context of the story that's told, it works fine, and I get where they're coming from, but Batman being the one to don the Robin costume first.
Yeah.
I'm not exactly cool with that, because, and who knows when this was established. I mean, I've read Robin's origin in that Batman Chronicles book, but my retention of reading things only once is pretty bad, given the amount of stuff that I read. So I can't recall specifically, but I've always had it in my brain, the established idea that the Robin costume is based off of the Flying Grayson costumes. So
yeah, but I feel like that is a more relatively more modern thing.
That may well be.
Because I think that was how writers started to figure out the origin of the Robin costume, because this was something, again, didn't really get picked up on again. I thought it was interesting. I had no issue with it. I thought it was an interesting take where I was like, oh wow, like, and again, something I had kind of forgotten, of Bruce before becoming Batman dons a disguise and to go work under the tutelage of this great detective in Gotham, and so it's the Robin costume that he can then pass down to Dick later.
Yeah.
But that splash page of Bruce as Robin, surrounded by his training.
It's fantastic.
And with another long lost Batman character, Harvey Harris, apparently one of Bruce's early mentors, the greatest detective who taught him to be a detective. I love the splash page. And again, I'm like, Harvey Harris, R.I.P. He's hanging out with Uncle Philip in the land of dejected comic books characters.
But this sequence here with Harvey, it kind of felt a little bit like Batman the Animated Series to me, in that it has that really is androgynous the word I want to use for the timeline? Like, he looks like a 1940s gumshoe.
I don't think that's the right word.
Probably not. It's not.
Anachronistic?
That's way too big for me. No.
Androgynous?
I don't know what that
means you can't tell his gender.
Well, I can't.
I mean he's got the short shorts, right? He has very lovely legs. So, okay, I'll give you something.
Look, I have a limited vocabulary. Get off me.
Don't at me. Don't at me about androgynous.
It's unclear the time frame, because you look at him and you could think, okay, this is happening in the 1940s, but the other things around it seem to be very modern. So it's a real blended mix. Like we've often talked about Batman in the Animated Series having that classic 1940s-ish look and feel to it, but there's still a lot of really modern stuff going on outside of that as well. So it's hard to really place a firm timeline to it. So I kind of got a Batman the Animated Series vibe just in that sequence there involving him, because of just basically how he's dressed and looks. Right.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Is that, it is more of a mashup of the different time frames.
And don't at me about the androgynous thing, people.
Maybe ambiguous?
Ambiguous. Is
that what you were going for?
Yes, that's it.
All right. And this has been the Holy BatCast vocabulary lesson for the week. Please make sure you do your worksheets and turn them in next week.
Don't be a drooly, people.
But yeah, another abandoned part of Bruce's history, but I don't hate it. Maybe just because I can't get enough of the Robin
costume.
hate
it. It's just not what I'm accustomed to, I guess. And I prefer the idea that the Robin costume was new and fresh because of the Flying Grayson's inspiration. I feel like that's a way that, Dick honors his parents putting on that costume to fight the crime, to exact revenge or bring to justice the people that caused the death of his family.
I hear you, and I don't disagree with you, but just to play devil's advocate, Robin donning his old Flying Grayson's costume as a disguise is not a very good disguise.
No, it's not. It's a horrible disguise.
But then again, Bruce
now,
wearing a version of his dad's Halloween costume, also maybe not the best disguise.
See, you can... I don't want to get that nitpicky about it. I'm just saying, I prefer the other way.
Well, now I'm going to write a story set when Dick Grayson was Robin, where he gets captured. They're like, we know you're Dick Grayson because you're wearing your trapeze outfit. And he's like, no, I'm just a big circus enthusiast. What are you talking about? I just really like trapeze artists.
They pull the domino mask off and there's Alfred, full mustache and all.
Another moment in this first issue that I love, I think it's a great moment, and I think that this is something that, again, I think has been kind of forgotten, but I don't think it should be. I think this should be written back into continuity, is when Bruce is in college. And he's always operating, in this case, under the assumption that he's going to become a police officer. Like, he thinks that the way to make his oath real is to become a cop and then bring people to justice. And when he's in his law class, how he learns the difference between justice and the law, I think is so great.
I agree. That sequence is excellent.
Like, I don't know if the example is the best of how he learns it, but the fact that Bruce is like, no, of course these people don't share blame. They're of different levels of blame. And the professor goes, well, you'd be wrong. They both are exactly the same level of blame. And Bruce goes, but is that justice? And he goes, no, that's the law. And I love that. I think that that's so powerful because it shows Bruce that that's why he has to work outside the law, because the law and justice are not the same thing.
I agree. That entire page is extremely compelling, just top to bottom. And I think you talk about moving a story along, having one page dictate that entire sequence there to give him that inspiration. Mm-hmm. I mean, the way that they do comics now, and I don't want to sound like I'm being overly critical, but I am being critical. That would have been something that somebody would have taken an entire issue to get to that point for in a modern 6-issue arc, say. Mm-hmm. Versus, I mean, this shows good storytelling doesn't have to be drawn out just for the sake of being drawn out. I mean, that this short, sweet, and to the point, and I think it's as effective as doing an entire issue on it, personally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, I love that moment. This whole first issue really is the secret origin of Batman because it takes you through the entire thing. So he really gets his due here. You get Joe Chill, you get Lou Moxon, you get a little bit of Leslie Tompkins, you get the death of the Wein. So, I mean, that's what they really commit to. But I do think it's funny that when he confronts Lou Moxon in his father's costume and Lou Moxon gets scared and runs out into traffic and gets hit by a car. So again, like Joe Chill, it's like, oh, thank God there are these external forces that are going to kill off the bad guys so Batman's secret can remain intact.
Right. Well, and I feel like I've seen that done before, and I don't know if I've seen it, stuff that occurred before this book or after, where the criminal is on the run and gets hit by a car. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like I've seen that at least a couple of times at some point.
Yeah, it's kind of the comic book version of Smallville, where every time Clark had to do something super, Lana would get knocked out.
Yeah.
So I really was a little worried that she might have some sort of like brain damage by the end of the series because she got knocked out every other episode, so she wouldn't witness Clark being super.
Judging by where her character wound up in the later seasons of that show, I'd say brain damage is definitely on the table.
I mean, I wasn't going to say it, but I was certainly thinking it loudly.
Don't at me, people. I like that show. I just don't like what happened to her.
I like that show too, but come on. It had its ups and downs.
That certainly did.
Let's be real. I mean, I love kryptonite-powered car racing, but...
who doesn't? I mean, that's a thing, right?
Yeah, and then there was the kryptonite gum, which was also something special. Anyway...
We have that last panel in this first issue And he says, eyes narrowed, jaw clenched, the grim Batman's own words of earlier this evening come back to him anew. I have not shed a single tear in my parents' memory since their funeral, he has said. And he had been right until now. And it's not even the emotions of that tear that's falling from his eye, but I absolutely love the artwork in that particular panel, that grim look of pissed off determination on his face while he's got that hand on the steering wheel driving the Batmobile. I think that's just a beautiful piece of art outside of just that emotional punch of the tear coming down out of that left eye.
No, I completely agree with you. Again, that's one of my favorite moments in this entire miniseries, and for all those reasons. I love the text, I love the image, I love the tear. It's great.
Here, here.
Perfect. Anyway, the next issue is more focused on, I think, Robin and Alfred.
Yeah, this one is kind of that was almost all Batman front to back on that one, and a little bit of the, the Weins and the early stuff. But this second issue, the force of that pimp hand in those early pages is incredible.
Totally.
He's got that boy in a daze after backhanding him like 3 or 4 times. It's incredible.
Oh, Batman. He's losing it. There's quite a few points in here where he's like, you want to test me? Come on, test me. I'm in no mood. So, yeah, I love it.
I'm shocked those panels haven't become the meme like him backhanding Robin.
Well,
because he's putting in work on this guy.
We could do it. Let's let's make it. Let's save poor Robin from the constant slapping.
And I love how he throws around the term punk so freely in this particular.
I also noticed, because it was 1980, how often Batman and Robin refer to each other as chum.
Was it more than once? I only noticed.
Oh, yeah. Multiple times. And even when Batman's pissed off, he's like, thanks, chum. It's just so strange to see. But the perfect reason Robin is there is Batman's starting to go a little too far, and Robin is always there to pull him back.
Yeah.
But then, we get the secret origin of Robin. I do like there's a moment where the judge is like, well, I can't let you adopt him because you're a single man. But, he can still live with you. It's fine. So I was amused by that because, again, it was like, it was a different time. But, in this one, they bring Zuko to justice, but only by Robin getting evidence against Zuko. He didn't actually try to go after him.
Mm-hmm. And I feel like this part of Robin's origin has pretty much stayed true right along, as far as the mobsters sweating down the circus owner for the protection money or whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
If there's another origin for Robin, I can't place it, and I'm not counting Batman Forever.
Yeah. Well, and even then, the broad strokes are similar. It's not, it's not them trying to get the protection money, but the fact that it's always trapeze artist, parents die because of a criminal in the middle of a show, Batman's in the audience, that kind of thing has always kind of remained pretty consistent. So as far as Robin's origin goes, this remains Dick Grayson's origin.
Yeah.
There's not really a huge difference here from
if it ain't
anything
broke,
that we
don't
know.
fix it, I think, is where they're at on that.
Well, in future years, because there's no more circus, I do wonder what's going to happen.
No,
is he just going to be working for Cirque du Soleil? Dick Grayson's going to become Canadian?
His parents will be improv performers.
Oh, great. And they don't actually die, their jokes die on stage, and then they leave in exile, and then that's why Dick needs to get adopted.
It's pointing out great artwork once again, that bottom right panel of page 6 where Batman is talking to Robin and he kind of has the cowl pulled up to his chin, or the cape pulled up to his chin. That is a great shot there. I love that.
No doubt. And then even in the following page when Dick is giving the oath.
Oh, with the candle
in the Batcave.
That's also tremendous.
Yeah. So, Dick Grayson's origin remains pretty consistent here. And what I like is they immediately jump through his origin of like kid to school to college. And so you're led, they explain that this Robin that you're seeing now is college age Robin. It's no longer child Robin.
Which would make sense because, it
was 1980. So they were just a few years away from introducing Jason Todd and Nightwing. So this was that weird time where Dick Grayson was a little older, but he was still Robin.
Right. And actually, since you said Nightwing, I'm just going to point out one of these books. I want to say it's issue 3. I don't want to spend the time flipping through it, but there is an advertisement for the new Teen Titans series starting.
Oh, that's
and
awesome.
it says check out a preview of it, and like DC, is it DC Presents 26? Is that the first appearance of the Teen Titans?
Sure. I don't know.
I think that's what it is. Anyway, there's a
going
really
with that.
cool, full page advertisement where it shows the cover of New Teen Titans #1 and says check out the preview, and this I'm almost sure it's DC Presents 26. As we go through the books,
I'll trust you.
I stumble across it. Anyway, it was really cool.
That is cool. I do love that. Like, that's the one thing about physical, like looking through old books and seeing old ads like that. God, it's like such a time machine. It's so cool.
You'll see in here, page 9 is the Green Lantern bobsled run.
Oh, it's not in mine. Sad.
The bottom left panel of that. Wow, thanks, Green Lantern. That could have been a disaster. And the other bobsled racer says, in a crash, we'd lose all the Hostess Twinkie cakes we had stashed inside.
That indeed would be a disaster.
I,
The other thing about this one is they talk about how as soon as Dick went away to college, Bruce shut down Wayne Manor and moved to the city. So this was that time where he lived in the penthouse in the middle of Gotham City, and Wayne Manor just sat there alone. And the other thing that I was confused by, but I read, I went back and checked because there's a certain point where it's like, oh, he drives into the secret tunnel into the Batcave under the Wayne Foundation building or whatever, and I was like, whoa, wait. So the Batcave here is under the Wayne Foundation building and not Wayne Manor? Or is it the same Batcave and it's just that huge that it's under both? But no, there's 2 Batcaves in this. There's a Batcave under Wayne Manor and there's a Batcave under the Wayne Foundation building.
good thing nobody knows about all these caves that are underneath Gotham City.
What I love, though, is that Bruce actually moved the T-Rex from Wayne Manor to the Batcave under the Wayne Foundation.
Or is it just a second T-Rex?
He just bought a second. I mean, why not? One for your main house, one for the vacation home. I would.
Did you notice the end of issue 3 calls out the issues where the penny and the T-Rex came from?
I did not.
I'm sure the digital had that thing where it shows, like, you know, we'll get to it when we get to it, but there's like the end of the book is like a thing that says, you know, here's what's in Batman's utility belt. Here's the, you know.
No, that's not in this.
Really?
No, it's not in this.
Oh my goodness. You missed out on a good piece then. Well, when we get to issue 3, we'll touch on that. And interestingly enough,
I have to dig into the long boxes. Damn you.
I turned the page from the Green Lantern thing, and what's on the other side of the Green Lantern thing? That Teen Titans thing I was just talking about.
Perfect.
But that it says in the bottom right corner, and don't miss the extra special 16-page preview comic starring the Titans, a free gift to you, and DC Comics Presents number 26.
Awesome.
And Changeling was still Beast Boy's name back then.
Yeah. I got to tell you, I only knew him as Changeling.
Really?
And oh yeah. And when, I think it was when the Teen Titans cartoon came out, and they started calling him Beast Boy. I was like, Beast Boy? That's not Beast Boy. That's Changeling. And I realized that at some point they changed his name. But yeah, I only knew him as Changeling my whole childhood.
I was listening, I think it's to the Comics Now show, which is Jay Yaws and Brian Warshaw doing that. Good show. You should check that out.
Oh, good guys.
Yeah, definitely. I think it was then it was talking about Beast Boy started out in Doom Patrol. I did not know that.
Oh, that I did know.
I am unfamiliar with Doom Patrol other than the comparisons made between it and the X-Men, which apparently came out like literally a couple of weeks or months apart.
Yeah, I think it was just a couple of months. I did know that, but I don't know how I knew that. But somehow I knew it because you're right. I haven't read a lot of Doom Patrol. I just know like the broad strokes of the characters of who they are, but I don't think I've read a lot of their books. But somehow I knew that that's where Changeling came from. The things you pick up and like it could have been like a page in a Who's Who or something like that, where I was like, oh, okay, he came from Doom Patrol. But anyway,
and I love this. The panel that comes on that next page after that beautiful advertisement is Dick having all these troubles at school where they're sweating him down for the money, or you know they're calling him a chicken. They're just picking on him, and he won't fight him because he knows he'd cripple him with his hands tied behind his back. He says. So yeah. showing that restraint when he could do something, he just chooses not to because it's the
okay.
Right way.
So the panel right under that is another one of my favorite panels in the book, where Dick says out loud, like he says, I'd sacrificed my chance to lead a normal life so other people could, because somebody somehow had to make a difference if life is going to be worth living at all. Like, what a perfect encapsulation of what it is to choose to be a hero in this universe, is you're giving up your chance to live a normal life so everyone else can. I love that.
That felt very much like a Dick Grayson moment to me. Mm-hmm. Like a classic Dick Grayson moment. And even today, he very much kind of carries that, I'm sacrificing my comfort, my life, and everything else for the greater good. So, I mean, that's been part of him right along as I know him for as long as I've known him, really.
Do you know who else does that a lot? Tim Drake.
Yeah, that's true.
It's Tim Drake. That's a very Tim Drake thing, too. And that's what's going on now, is he keeps putting off going to college and stuff because he keeps wanting to help everyone else.
Yeah, Drake is my favorite Robin not named Carrie Kelly, but between you and me, I don't want to say it too loud because I don't want to get sweated down by everybody else. Damien's catching him.
I don't want to talk about that.
I'm sure you don't.
Anyway. The other thing I noticed in this is I was like, oh, like for years and years and years now, Batmobiles have been enclosed. But one thing that we miss with the convertible Batmobiles is that great image of Batman's cape flowing out behind the car as it drives through Gotham.
Yep.
I forgot what a thing that was in the 80s, and we don't see that anymore.
It's really sad. Cool. And
because it looks so great. I don't know if the physics work, but I don't care. It looks cool.
I mean, the cape is way blown out of proportion and exaggerated for so much of that, but it's still so cool looking that I just let it slide every time.
Hell yeah. And there are a couple times in these books where they mentioned that, a couple weeks ago there had been some explosion and Bruce hasn't quite been the same since this explosion. So they're continuing to build the mystery of there's something wrong with Bruce. Something's up with Bruce. Something's up with Bruce. No? Okay.
That was lost on me. Sorry.
Nightmare Before Christmas? No? All right.
I like the movie, but I'm not so into it that I have everything readily available to understand.
Well, damn you, Jamie.
I've only seen it 3 times.
What?
Yeah.
How's that even possible? What do you do with your time?
Apparently not watch Nightmare Before Christmas.
Apparently not. Anyway, then we do get the secret origin of Alfred. And again, as we mentioned, I love that here it's already set up that Alfred was kind of a badass in his youth, here helping people in World War II against the Nazis, which doesn't get more badass than that. I love that. And I do love kind of the reluctance on Alfred's part, where he even admits, he's like, heaven forgive me for the pain that I myself inflicted in the course of that noble endeavor, so that men of goodwill everywhere could be free once more. So I love that he's like, I did things I'm not proud of, but hopefully it was for the right reasons. But then comes a part that where we're like, oh, well, this has been lost. Alfred was an actor. Who knew?
I feel like I knew that from some iteration that he spent some time on the stage. And I don't know if it was animated series or what it is that I got that from. Because it sure wasn't from reading this book.
I knew it from this. But it was one of those things that, again, I'd forgotten until I reread it. And I went, oh, yeah, that's right. That was a thing. So please, I want in the next movie, Jeremy Irons to quit and go, I've decided I'm going to pursue my dreams of being an actor. I want to play a bitchy lion in an animated movie.
That last panel, no, again, pacing and whatnot is good here, but do you find it as odd as I do that the words, for generations there has been a pennyworth in domestic service, my son, until now, swear that you won't let the grand old tradition die with me, Alfred, swear?
Oh, God.
You need to be a butler, boy. We can't not have somebody be a butler in this family.
You would think servants would want more for their children.
I'm saying, I know you spent all this time helping free people from Nazi oppression, and you're quite the accomplished stage actor, but bitch, put on this tuxedo and get out there and dust. Does that?
Yeah. Exactly. I know you're trying to make it on the stage, but if you could go ahead and just pursue the house cleaning industry, it'd be better.
It just and obscure.
It is. It's so odd. It's so crazy. I've got to call out the fact that he gives a little name drop to his brother Wilfred, which was picked up for Batman and Robin of all places.
Is that the only other place he's been mentioned?
I mean, that I know of. Maybe he's mentioned Wilfred before, but the two places I know it from is here and from Batman and Robin.
And I like how he just full blown forces his way into the house and gets to work too. I mean, that's...
Yeah, he's like, by the way, I work here. I didn't know you could do that. I'm going to drive over to Warner Brothers and tell them that. I'm going to walk into the DC Films office and go, by the way, I made my dad a promise. I'm here to whip shit into shape. Thank you. Coffee's at 8. Please don't be late.
I support this endeavor in full, and I would like it if somebody was videotaping that as it happened.
Yeah.
Frankly, I wouldn't be surprised if you got the job doing it. But anyway,
I mean, it couldn't get much worse. Just get ready for a shitload of Tim Drake movies.
As long as other characters are mixed in with him, I'm okay with it.
They're not.
It's just all Tim Drake walking around
Tim
talking to
Drake
himself
all the time, every time. He meets no one. It's actually going to be 2 hours of him tinkering in the Batcave.
Not the Belfry, but the Batcave.
Yeah, well, the Batcave to start. You
Belfry in the sequel.
Somewhere to grow from. Yeah, of course. Anyway, yeah, then Alfred doesn't find out about Batman and Robin until Bruce comes home injured. So yeah, this timeline is a little wonky. I'm not used to it, and it was something where, again, I had to back it up and reread it and go, whoa, 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 whoa. Like, is that right? But yeah, it didn't last.
See, I for some reason, I didn't catch it at first when he showed up at the house. I had it in my mind that it was Thomas and Bruce standing there, not Bruce and Dick.
That's why I had to reread it. I thought the same thing. I thought he came in and pushed himself on Thomas. And then when I realized, oh no, that was Bruce.
Not the way I would have done it, but can't blame a guy for trying something new.
It's not the choice I would have gone with. He shit the bed at the Battle of Monmouth. Okay. Anyway, Alfred takes the job. Now he's like, oh, at least I don't just dust. Now I help Batman and Robin, so that's kind of cool. And Robin's a fan of Dr. Pepper. So apparently Dick Grayson grew up in Texas.
Texas is the only place that has Dr. Pepper?
Texans drink Dr. Pepper like it's water. I mean, everybody can have it, but oh my God, I had no idea that Dr. Pepper is what you drink in Texas.
Carbonated fruit juice is a big deal out there, huh?
Then you get another super fun and nerdy splash page of all these villains, and these are at least labeled for your convenience. But here, I don't really need the labels. These guys I know. A
couple of them I would not have, but most of them I would have. I love that rendition of Scarecrow, by the way. Again, these classic looks for all of these characters, I freaking love. Mr. Freeze is still a little cheesy back then. And the Black Spider is the only one I would have questioned because he looks so different than what he eventually looks like. But I wouldn't have got him or Killer Moth. The rest I think I would have had a grip on.
Yeah.
And I don't know who that one is just to the left of Ivy with the the button chops and the green sunglasses.
Yeah, I don't either. Well, he's not the Black Spider. He's the green glasses.
Professor Milo looks like Moe from Three Stooges.
Huh? Yeah. Well, and again, when we see these splash pages with all these villains, obviously some of those villains have been not completely forgotten. Again, there are people more well versed than we are who would know, but they haven't been used in a long, long time. So
I expect Tweedledee and Tweedledum to show up in the next arc of Batman by Tom King.
Well, great.
Anyway,
then we get
Ra's al Ghul picture too, by the way.
Yeah,
actually, most of them are just fantastic.
And at that point, Ra's is pretty new.
He would have been 74, 72, 74. So
okay, so at least 8 years. All right. For some reason, I thought it was less of a window, but yeah. Then we get the abbreviated origin of the Joker, which again is it echoes The Killing Joke, which I went, oh wait, let me think about this timeline, because for some reason I thought The Killing Joke defined this part of the Joker, but no.
I love that panel of him taking off the helmet in the upper right of the next page too.
Yeah.
Just it's classic Joker look, and very well done at that.
Oh, it's so great. And then you get the abbreviated origin of Two-Face.
Mm-hmm.
And really abbreviated within a page. And I was like, I would read that page for all of these guys because, again, it's what a great little crash course on these villains. But they just do it for the 2, which is too bad. They would like to see it for the others. But anyway, as they're trying to figure out like which of these guys is tormenting me and wants to destroy me, the Batmobile, which I freaking love, again, it's that super classic, like almost Super Friends Batmobile that I can't help but love, explodes with another threatening note. One by one, I will destroy the things that make you what you are, and then I will destroy you.
And another ending panel of grim, pissed off determination.
Batman is over this shit.
And by the way, did you know that you have a golden opportunity to become a charter member of the Superman Club for $3?
What?
Yeah.
Why didn't anybody tell me?
Because you read digital, that's why.
Yeah, well, welcome to the future. Whenever I see old ads like that, I'm so tempted to like send in a little, $3 in a membership just to see what comes back. It'd be worth the $3 to see what they send back to me.
Okay.
Excuse me, sir. It's no longer
write this down. 200 Fifth Avenue, New York, 10010.
Yeah.
Send $1.25 plus 50 cents for postage and handling. And you, my friend, will get the wonderful world of amazing live sea monkeys.
Worth it. Doing it right now.
And by the way, these cartoons are imaginative and do not represent the actual sea monkeys. So they don't have a castle. They don't have a mom with a bow in her hair.
We've been lied to our whole lives. They look like Mac and me. Anyway, I'm sure that just my envelope would just be returned to sender, but I like to think that there's someone still in that office who's like, we got one! Send me the actual sea monkeys.
There was actually another page of mail advertisements, and it's like, why would they do this by mail? And then I realized, they didn't have internet and that shit in 1980. But it's like all these guys advertising comics from like the 40s and 50s and stuff like that, and send a self-addressed stamped envelope to this PO box, and I'll send you a list of what my stuff is. And
oh, totally, I remember that. I don't think I ever actually did it. But I remember like going through and checking the boxes of the comics I needed because I was going to send away for them, and then I just never did. But yeah, I distinctly remember that. And even when I sent away for these copies of the Untold Legend of the Batman, yeah, I had to cut out the proof of purchases. I had to put them in an envelope, and I think I had to put like whatever, $1.50 in there for shipping and handling. And I think I taped quarters to a piece of paper and put it in there with those proof of purchases and actually send it in the mail.
Do you have any idea how many bags of Lay's potato chips I went through getting all those Ghost Obi-Wan figures in 1997 or whatever that was?
I bet.
I'll put it this way. I had like 26 of those things.
Wow.
So
that's amazing.
We went through a lot of chips. Anyway.
So the Batmobile has been destroyed. Batman runs off to go put the pressure on some of his sources, and then we learn another long lost DC character, and that is, what the heck is his name? Jack Edison, the greatest stunt driver in the world, who builds them Batmobiles whenever they call.
That is not a thing I was familiar with in the least of this character or this origin for the Batmobile.
Yeah, this one also has been lost to the ages.
But I kind of like it in the sense that this would be a guy that would know how to make a vehicle that would obviously be able to take a beating from super criminals and whatnot, reinforce it in the right places. And the fact that he is indebted to Batman for saving him from a disaster that he was involved in. So he would feel compelled to keep his secret and not be inclined to let anybody know who he was. Mm-hmm. So I like the presentation in this idea. I think this.
Yeah, it's kind of a cool idea. I am amazed that he has enough spare parts to put together a Batmobile in a week. I mean, that is impressive. But what this kind of echoes is the animated series episode, The Mechanic. It wasn't Jack Edison. They created a new character, but the idea was, there's this mechanic who is who Batman goes to when the Batmobile gets destroyed or damaged, and the Penguin uses the mechanic to get to Batman. And this is kind of a similar idea of, there's this other guy out there who takes care of the Batmobile when Batman needs it.
Did you ever read there was a novelization, maybe we talked about this before. It came out not very long after Batman 89. It would have been like around the 1990 area somewhere, and it was just a series of short stories in novel form. It wasn't an illustrated one. And there was one, I want to say it was called like Legends of the Batman or something like that. There's one story in there where Batman goes in to pick up like a costume or something for his utility belt. I don't even remember what it was because it's been 28 years since I've read the stupid thing. But anyway, he goes in there to pick up his stuff, and this guy's like got a front for maybe like a dry cleaning service or something. And he's like, I need this, and this by tomorrow night. And he's like, okay, I got you. And he walks out, and it talks about the guy, putting the order back and getting things inclined, and the bell and the door rings, and he looks up, and it's the Penguin, and the Penguin's there giving him the list of the stuff that he needs for his umbrellas or something like that. So it turns out like this same guy supplying everybody with the tech to do all their stuff.
Oh.
It was pretty cool, actually, I thought.
Yeah, it's like that scene in The Last Jedi.
The who?
In The Last Jedi.
Who? I'm not familiar with this.
It's the best Star Wars movie ever made.
Okay.
It's a shame you missed it. But how they talked about how the supplier sells weapons to both sides because they're the ones who profit from it. Similar kind of idea. Anyway. Batman goes to check in with his gang of ethnic stereotypes.
He calls the one Irish.
Yeah. His name is Shamrock because he's Irish.
Of course it is.
Yeah. But anyway, he goes, nobody knows anything about who is after him, and then he eventually goes and talks to good old Jim Gordon, and then we get the secret origin of Jim Gordon. And this one, obviously, before it was decided that Gordon was there for the death of the Waynes, or before year one or anything. So Gordon and Gordon meets Batman as Batman, and it seems like he joined the Gotham PD later in life in this version.
Before we get too deep into that, back up to that one panel in the previous page. Queen Bess, do you not look at her and think of Della Reese from Harlem Nights?
Yeah.
Okay. Just wanted to see if it was just me.
Yeah. So anyway, then we get how Jim Gordon and Batman eventually created this alliance. And another amazing image when Batman shows up in Gordon's office. The big swoopy cape in front of his face.
Yeah.
Love it. But yeah, they eventually, have this understanding that they're on the same side, and we learn about that, and then that also gives Jim Gordon some time to reminisce about how his daughter eventually joined the crime-fighting world.
And fights... Who is this here? Jet Set Jessie, jewel thief extraordinaire, and beats her with Twinkies.
Oh, I was like, this doesn't sound familiar. It's another Twinkie ad.
I'm telling you, man, these ads make me laugh in these books. They're fantastic.
So yeah, I was wondering if we were going to get any Batgirl, because we're almost at the end of this thing, and I was like, man, no Batgirl? And that was one thing I just noticed overall. I was like, just all of these origins are essentially for white men.
And
right before 2018 in me speaking, where I'm like, oh, this was before they realized that, oh yeah, characters didn't have to be white, they didn't have to be men.
I love that panel at the top of the previous page where Batman just throws Joker from the moving Batmobile on the steps of the police station.
Yeah.
I got a huge chuckle out of that.
Yeah, it's great.
And why in the hell is Barbara sending her dad this autographed picture of her with that really seductive
I
look
know,
in her eyes?
I know. Is that a thing? Should I be doing that to my mom and dad? I should send them autographed headshots? I didn't know this.
Maybe. I don't know. Just seemed kind of odd to me. And why a library science major would have a headshot like that, I'm not entirely sure.
She's a failed actress, aren't they all?
Then she's got that Princess Leia thing going on in the bottom panel of the next page.
Mm-hmm. Gotham's chief librarian. She
means business.
Yeah. But yeah, you find out how she ends up. And here's something that cracked me up, though, is like he's telling this story to us, the reader. But apparently he's saying it out loud because Robin responds to him. So he's literally monologuing Barbara's backstory out loud, alone in his office.
Love that Batgirl costume shot in the upper left panel there. That
Oh,
costume
it's
is
great,
amazing.
So classic. I love it. Yeah, I love how all the characters' looks in this miniseries is spot on. So great. Including Robin, including Batman, including Batgirl, like all the villains. I think they just look great. We get a quick little history of Lucius Fox.
Which now it's time for me to embarrass myself and turn in my fan card. I had no idea Lucius Fox was around in 1980. I thought he was a much newer character.
Yeah. I knew he was around, but I mean, he was always kind of at the outskirts. And it wasn't, because he was in the animated series too, but even then he was never super involved. And I think I give a lot of credit to David Goyer and Christopher Nolan for going, hey, there's this character Lucius Fox. He's always around. He's there to back up Bruce at Wayne Enterprises, but how else could we use him? So I always thought that was really clever how they made him a little more involved.
I agree. It doesn't hurt that I read everything that I see him in Morgan Freeman's voice now either. Right.
He's in much better shape in this than he is in the animated series. The animated series, they made him pudgier, if I remember correctly. Here, he's much more sophisticated.
Well, I mean, this is the beginning of his successful run, so he hasn't had time to catch up to that yet.
Right. But that actually carries through the Telltale games. I've been playing the Batman Telltale game.
Mm-hmm.
And number one, I freaking love it. Love it so much. But Lucius Fox takes on still that gadget master persona in that game, very much taking the lead from the Nolan films.
There is a miniseries that just started a week or two ago called Batman Sins of the Father that, if I'm not mistaken, is based off of those games.
Ooh.
I think it's like a 4, possibly a 6, but I think it's a 4-issue miniseries.
I will have to check that out.
Because I started reading issue number 1, and I mean, they're talking about all these horrific things that Thomas Wayne did to people and getting them committed to Arkham Asylum. I'm like, what the hell's going on here? So,
yeah, that's from the game. I didn't want to mention it because, kind of spoilers, I guess.
Sorry.
But yeah, no, it's fine.
I mean, it's literally in the first couple pages of this book that Thomas Wayne was doing awful things to people. So. Sorry if you took that as a spoiler, but it's like really early in the book.
No, I think it's okay. And I mean, that is the premise of the game, is essentially Thomas Wayne's past comes back to haunt Bruce, which is really where the story kicks off.
Interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting. I'm at the very end of episode 5 of season 1. It is so good. I got immediately sucked in, and so I'll probably do an episode in the next week or so once I finish it up. I've already called in the troops because I know you haven't played it, and you probably won't play it.
Nope.
But yeah, it's great. But yeah, they do some interesting things with some of the characters, including Thomas Wayne.
Well, I should probably avoid that until I'm done reading this miniseries then, because that'll wind up spoiling me. If it's based on
maybe, but I mean, that's kind of one of the biggest things is like, yeah, Thomas Wayne did some not great things in his past that come back. Anyway, we'll talk about that soon. Bruce has an epiphany. He goes back to Wayne Manor, which, as we said, no one's there because he decided to move into the city.
That shot of him running toward the mansion in the moonlight is amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
it's so simple, but it's so beautiful.
Every shot of Batman in this miniseries is amazing. He looks so good. And whether it's from at a distance, whether it's close up, whether it's shadow, he just looks amazing in almost every frame that he's in.
I agree. I love the way the cape is around him and the kind of the motions that it has in all the panels. You look at the cowl, and I think to myself, the ears aren't too short; they're not too long. I mean, I honestly don't know if anybody who has been around Batman for a long time, like, from recognizing the blue and gray costume, because apparently there's kids now that don't know Batman had a blue and gray costume at one point, which I can't get my head around because even my kids know that shit. They assume his costume is supposed to be black and gray or all black, but I can't comprehend anybody looking at the rendition of Batman in these books and not thinking how classic and how beautiful it looks.
Yeah. Well, and I'm a sucker for the blue and gray anyway.
Sure.
And so, yeah, I love it. So, yeah, he gets back to Wayne Manor. He's kind of confronted with these ghosts of his past as we start to get to the solution of the mystery. Who would know all of this? Who would be after Batman, trying to destroy Batman? And It's none other than Bruce Wayne himself.
But were you aware, sir, that you could get self-defense in Kung Fu and karate from the New Orient Karate School in Avon, New Jersey?
I did not. I had no idea, but thank you for that. I wonder if they're still around.
Send 25 cents for details, it says.
Worth it.
These ads are cracking me up, though. Seriously.
Anyway, this was one where I was like, oh, yeah, that's right. That was the big solution, is that that explosion that happened a couple weeks ago caused an episode where Batman's two personalities essentially split, which I do think is a meaningful metaphor with who is he really? Is he really Bruce Wayne? Is he really Batman? And Bruce Wayne always suffers because of Batman. And the fact that Bruce Wayne kind of splits off and wants to destroy Batman so he can live. I'm like, I actually think that's pretty compelling. But you seem to be less enthused.
Look, I get what they're going for. I get the message. It's all received, and I think it's well done enough. The problem I have here is it almost felt a little two-face-ish to me. I just, the conflicting personality idea, once more, as with my other gripes, in the context of this story, I think it works fine, but I'm not sure how well I can readily receive the idea of Bruce and Batman truly being that separate, in that this would be the root of this problem that he's been dealing with for these 3 issues. It's not bad. I don't want to say it's bad. I'm just saying I think maybe there might have been a better way to approach it. And I don't even know what that better way is. I'm not sure that this sat right with me, because I felt that the vast majority of everything that happened up to these last pages was so much stronger than what the delivery was in these last few pages.
Yeah, and I think I get what you're saying. Is it definitely works better on a conceptual level than it does on like a realistic level, because you kind of have to buy that Batman would have had like blackouts where then Bruce Wayne took over and then set up all of these things and stuff, and they don't get into any of that. You just kind of have to accept that, yeah, okay, for whatever reason. Again, it works better, I think, if you just think of it as a concept of, oh, Bruce Wayne is the one who's paying for Batman, and so he would be he would have the most to gain from Batman being eliminated. But as far as like the actual logistics of how that works, it gets a little fuzzy, and I think that's why they don't even get into it. Is like, I don't know if all of that really holds up as far as how that conflict could take place. So I mean, I kind of get what you're saying.
Yeah, and I don't want to bash on it or anything, because I do actually like the fact that Robin is there at the end in that costume to help see him through it.
Well, and again, I that's one thing I really love about the story is the story kicks off with the destruction of that costume, and then that costume also becomes what saves Bruce. I just love using that as the bookends to it.
Yeah. That last page, oh my God. I feel like I've seen that like a lot. And if I haven't seen this specific image, I've seen a lot of images that have bore tremendous similarity to it.
The final page of the book,
yeah, that splash page with the moon and the city skyline and everything. I think that's an incredible amazing shot. And I feel like Jim Lee's done an image like that for a cover somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, well, there's no shortage of shots of Batman on a roof looking out on Gotham City at night.
True.
But yeah, like this one is gorgeous again, and it's a beautiful and perfect way to end the book. I like you, I love that Robin's the one who's there to pull Batman back as he does in all the best stories, using that connection to Thomas Wayne's costume. He's always got Batman's back. And then I do love you know, that final page where it's almost like he understands what he's, and it goes back to what we said about Robin, is like what he's sacrificing in Bruce Wayne's life so that Batman can live. And he's kind of accepting that in this final page. So, he continues on as Batman, and I love the final couple lines here where it says, every night without cease, without slumbering, the Batman prowls the streets of the city he loves. The Dark Avenger, the eternal champion, for the Batman is a legend, and legends can never die.
Give me a poster with that on it. I'll even take those words on that poster.
Yeah. So I love it. I mean, it's essentially acknowledging that those sacrifices he has to make for himself are worth it.
And you don't have anything after that page?
Nope, that's the end of mine.
See, there's 3 pages after this in mine. It's The Secrets of the Batman. And it says, as an extra bonus, we now take you deep under the Wein Foundation building for a grand tour of the Batcave. And it shows Batman's workshop, his repair shop where he works on the vehicles. It says originally this section of the Batcave was dug for a subway station that was never completed and never connected to the main line. It shows a secret exit that leads to Finger Alley, an empty warehouse owned by Bruce Wayne.
Yes. Oh, good call. Throughout the book, they mentioned Finger Alley, which I loved.
Then it's got the garage where the Batmobile and the Whirly Bat stored in the trunk. It's got the study. He's got a Batcave recreation, the study in Wayne Manor where he first got the inspiration to become Batman. It's got the computerized crime files, got the laboratory, and then it's got the trophy room. Contains mementos of many of Batman's cases, including the mechanical Tyrannosaurus from Batman number 35 and the giant penny from World's Finest number 30. Then the last page, it shows like an overhead shot of everything with the secret exit. It shows underground passages from the Batcave, and the manor shows like there's a vertical capable bat plane that can come up out of the roof of the building. It shows the bat boat taking off into the waterway behind it. It's got the utility belt, and it shows all the stuff in there, including skeleton keys and lockpicks, batarangs, rebreather, so on and so forth. Mm-hmm. And then it's got flying equipment showing the bat plane and Batcopter and the Whirly Bat.
And now that you mention it, all that sounds familiar. I totally remember that from when I had the physical copy. And yeah, it's kind of crappy they didn't include it digitally.
I mean, it seems to me that's a pretty good part of the book. I don't know why they cropped that out.
I don't know. Because they want to reward you, Jamie, for keeping it old school.
I guess so.
So, well worth it. So anyway, there you go. That's the Untold Legend of the Batman. So why don't we wrap it up with some closing thoughts and sure, letter grades, because you know how I like to do that. So Jamie, closing thoughts on the Untold Legend of the Batman.
It's probably an unfairly, mostly forgotten piece of Batman history. The cult following seems strong enough for it, but I don't feel like a ton of people have read this or are familiar with it because I never see it discussed outside of us talking about it in the last couple of days where people have said, oh yeah, that. I think that's unfortunate because I think it's worthwhile. I think it's a good story. I think it's compelling. I think it's well written enough. The art is great, as we discussed numerous times. Overall, I think this is a very solid cornerstone in Batman lore, and I think more people should go seek it and find it. It's obviously the digital thing's easy enough to find. It's not like a super rare book that's going to be hard to find. You might have to mail order it versus finding it at your local brick and mortar shop, but it's worth your time to do. As far as letter grade, a few issues aside, I think it was really good. I think it's really worthwhile. I think I'd probably landed at an A-.
Awesome. And yeah, I mean, I would agree with that. I do think it's a shame that it seems like it is somewhat forgotten, which is part of why I wanted to do this episode to begin with, was just to bring it back up so people who hadn't heard of it might go seek it out and check it out, because I think it is worth the read and it is worth your time. It's worth it because it's really fun to just see where the origins of these characters were back in 1980 and how much of it is stuff that remained consistent and how much has changed and shifted through the years. That's part of the fun of it. You can't beat the artwork. The artwork is gorgeous. And it's just a really great classic Batman story. I love it. I think, part of the reason I love it is nostalgia based because of how much I loved it as a kid, but that is all part of it. But I definitely recommend checking it out. I think it's a great crash course in Batman mythology, even if some of it hasn't stood the test of time. Enough of it has that I would still recommend anyone who wants to learn more about Batman and the characters in his world should go find this and check it out. So for me, it's a big solid A. Like you, there are a couple things that I'm like, oh, that was a little weird, but I feel like time has taken care of those issues because they don't really matter anymore, but it is absolutely worth the time in checking it out. As we were talking about it, someone even tweeted us, you just mentioned that one of our listeners was like, oh, I had an audio tape version of this. And I kind of remember that. I didn't have it, but I have a fuzzy memory of that existing. And according to Wikipedia, that was also 1989. So I feel like 1989 was the last time DC Comics really pushed this out there, and it hasn't really been out there since.
That's a shame. I mean, that's 29 years of kind of ignoring a story that I wouldn't put this on par with the likes of some of the more iconic stories, but I wouldn't put it that far behind it where I would have just ignored this and swept it under the rug. So I find it unusual that they don't seem to have acknowledged that this has existed past that point.
Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah, because it's tough to call it one of the most iconic Batman stories because the story, as I mentioned at the beginning, is more a vehicle to tell a bunch of smaller stories. So that's almost secondary to all the rest of the content, but it's still, something that should be celebrated.
Right. And I don't want to say this in the idea that I want DC Comics to capitalize on the passing of a writer, but Len Wein is kind of a hot topic in comics at the moment because of his passing and because of the iconic stuff that he has done over the years. I would think maybe some kind of a commemorative edition might be in order. Again, I'm not saying they should cash in on his passing, but honor him, get this out there so more people can see it, because I think it's a worthwhile work that more people should see.
Yeah, I completely agree. So there you go. If you guys haven't checked this out, it comes with our seal of approval, and maybe we've done our small part, Jamie, in getting the word out there for people to rediscover this somewhat forgotten piece of Batman history.
We're fighting the good fight, sir. Chum, as it were.
We do what we can with what we've got. Great. Anyway, let us see what you all out there have to say and wrap up, as we always do, with the Wein Manor Mailbox.
Wein Manor Mailbox.
And Jamie, that was our very first entry into the Wein Manor Mailbox contest.
All right.
And yeah, great job. This is from listener Chrissy. Chrissy did not give a last name. So hi, Chrissy. Thank you for doing that. Well done. And we appreciate you participating. I do wonder if you're messing with me. I
was thinking it. He said it. I was thinking it. It is pretty cool considering. I mean, I don't hate the music from that movie, but I do have to wonder if there might have been just a little bit of trolling going on right there. I don't know.
Maybe, especially because I started the contest being like, I'm tired of that clip from Batman Forever, and Chrissy's like, well, then how about the score? So well played, Chrissy. Good job. And thank you for sending that in. We do appreciate it. And so for those out there listening, contest is still running. If you've got an idea for an intro to the Wein Manor Mailbox, please send that our way because we will use it on the show. Send that to holybatcast@rf4rm.com. And just call that Wein Manor Mailbox Contest. And you've got till the end of March to send those our way. We will play them on the show, and then we will choose a winner, and that winner gets a fabulous prize to be determined depending on what we decide to buy. Again, I think it'll at least be a Blu-ray, but maybe like a Blu-ray and a comic or something. We'll make it worth your while because you guys are going to do some work, and we'll give you something that is worth you doing that work. So thank you. Chrissy, great job. Now, let's actually read some emails. So here we go. First email here is from our old pal Stuart Busire. He says, hey, Andy and Jamie, it's Stuart from Guernsey here. Hope you're both doing well. Have you decided what your next long review will be? Do you have any ideas lined up? Also, it was great to see you two together. At first, I thought Andy was with Dan Didio, and then I realized that it was the Bat Raider. As always, keep up the good work on the show, Stuart. So yeah, Jamie and I, we were together to see Black Panther. I posted that photo on Twitter and on Instagram, so you can actually see our big dumb faces. But you were Dan Didio, which is good.
All right, then. I've gotten that. I've gotten Bill Goldberg, which I appreciate the Goldberg sentiment, but he spends way more time at the gym than I do.
Well, and someone said, and it cracked me up. Somebody goes, I thought it was Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo. Which I can kind of see.
Maybe,
I can kind of see that.
Yeah, it's kind of, sort of. Those two have way more talent than I do, but
So as for the next long review, short answer is no. We haven't decided.
Yes, we
But-
have. We're going to do every single Batman comic in chronological order, starting with Detective 27.
You just made me so tired.
Well, there's only a few thousand of them out there.
Yeah. Yeah, we have not decided. We should decide. We will decide, but we'll think about it. Anyway, next message here is from Tom Fallows. Okay, I swear to God, I did not read this email before we recorded, but it's amazing how the stars align sometimes. Okay, this is what he says. He says, "Hey, Andy and Jamie, I was listening to Disorder the other week, and during your Dumbo episode, Andy was talking about the decline and rarity of circuses in the modern world. With that being said, how can Dick Grayson's origin be updated in today's world? Does the circus background fit, or can it be updated into something new without losing the gypsy rogue side to Dick Grayson's character? Keep the podcast coming, guys. Tom from Liverpool."
Wow, that's
Tom,
eerie.
isn't that bizarre? I swear to God, I had no idea this email was here. We just talked, how weird. Yeah, I think that traditional circuses, yes, have gone away, but Cirque du Soleil ain't going anywhere, and they've got trapeze, so you can still have a circus without having it with a side of animal cruelty.
I still think the improv thing is the way to go, but what do I know?
Yeah, the Graysons are groundlings in L.A.
Groundlings, yes. Perfect.
Anyway, so yeah, it is interesting. I mean, that has been Dick Grayson's origin for so long now, whatever it's been, 77 years, because it's like a year after Batman. And that the circus remains, but it is weird because circuses aren't really a thing the way they used to be.
But they're still in public awareness, but there obviously is going to be a point where that's not going to be as prevalent.
Exactly.
Like my kids know what a circus is, but their kids
Right.
probably will not.
And that's what I talked about on Disorder, but Dumbo, where I was like, wow, like this was a very modern story with the circus. And now kids watching it are like, wait, like, is that a thing where these tents go up in the middle of your town with elephants and tigers and alligators and whatnot, and not like that anymore. So anyway, next message here is from Douglas June. It says, "Greetings, Holy BatCast family. What actress do you think would have played Wonder Woman in the 90s? Gina Davis, Demi Moore, or Courtney Cox? ? Douglas, thank you for the question. Jamie, any thoughts on this?
I would have loved Gina Davis to take a shot at that in the 90s, but Demi Moore I would have no objection to. I think she's a solid actress. I think she carries that look. Gina just kind of has more of that, I guess, for lack of something better to call it, like especially after seeing the likes of The Long Kiss Goodnight, she just has that strong female empowerment vibe about her. So I think she would have been almost ideal for that character during that time frame. Courtney Cox, I don't see that at all. I mean, I get the physical similarities, the dark hair, the light eyes and whatnot, but I don't see her in that part at all.
Yeah, we're on the same page. I love me some Courtney Cox, but I don't really see it. Demi Moore, I think could have been great, but of these three that you gave us, Gina Davis for me is the winner. She is very statuesque. She is a tall, beautiful woman, and she wasn't afraid to go badass in the mid 90s. So I think she could have been awesome.
I miss Gina Davis. She needs to do more.
I know, she's awesome. I actually worked with her a little bit.
I recall this.
Yeah,
I recall being
she's
unbelievably jealous about this.
And she's wonderful. I never got a photo with her because we were working together and it felt weird. Because I don't know, I was like, I'm supposed to be professional. We're working together, so I should not ask. But yeah, she's amazing. And she's still out there fighting for strong female role models. That's what she's doing with her. That's why you don't see her in as much stuff, but she has her own foundation and she goes out there fighting for female representation in film and TV, especially in children's film and TV, because she wants kids out there to have really strong female role models.
Good. I love that.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. I love that that's what she's doing with her time. She even said, she goes, if you ever see me show up in another movie, like playing the love interest to Sean Connery, and she goes, because, that would be the correct age difference, like 30 years. She goes, you'll know that the money ran out.
She does seem like a really cool person. I mean, like anytime I've ever seen her in an interview, or I mean, if you're married to Rennie Harlan, you got to have a sense of humor, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, she strikes me as
awesome.
She strikes me as the kind of person, and I don't know for sure, but like the person you see in interviews and whatnot, that's genuine. That's her. That's how I always felt with her.
Yeah. All right. Next message here is from Isaiah Espinoza. Isaiah says, "Hello, I'm a fairly new listener and I'm loving the podcast. My question is about Christopher Nolan. Did everyone forget that he basically started the DCEU by getting Zack Snyder to direct Man of Steel? It seems like no one gives credit to Nolan for this. Thanks." Isaiah, thank you for the message. Jamie, you want to take first pass at that?
I give him the credit for it, certainly, because I adore Zack Snyder. I adore Christopher Nolan, and the two of them collaborating made what is still to this day my favorite of the DC EU films in the post Dark Knight trilogy era. Whether or not anybody else would agree with that, most people probably want to slap him for being the one that hired Zack Snyder. But my understanding is that Zack was not the first choice for it. But to me, I think he wound up being an excellent choice when all was said and done. So, yeah, I mean, for me, I think I'll give all the credit there. But
yeah, I don't think people have forgotten. It's just because he was only involved with Man of Steel and then really stepped back. And so even though he has an executive producer credit on, at least on most of the DC films, I'd have to go back and check. He hasn't really been involved since Man of Steel. And even Man of Steel, he didn't step out front of it. You know, he helped usher it and Godfather it along, but he never made it his movie. And so I think that's maybe why that people don't talk about him as much with the DC films, is because his participation has really been limited ever since Man of Steel. But when Man of Steel was coming out, I think people were very aware of it. But then he really stepped back, and Zack stepped up, and so it really became more about Zack Snyder, for better and for worse. As far as the perception goes,
right?
Not as far as the quality. But yeah. And next message here, last message, is from Imad Elaguz. It says, "Hola, can you compare Batman against villains and superheroes that can match him in a category? For example, is he smarter than the Riddler, a better fighter than Nightwing, a better strategist than Lex, etc.? Also, please do a review of Injustice, the comic book. See ya," in the Harley Quinn voice. Imad, thank you so much for the message. A review of Injustice. I know you recently pick this up, Jamie?
I actually just read that for the first time maybe 2 weeks ago or so. Probably closer to 3 weeks. I finished it up.
Maybe that's why Imad is asking for it, because I'm sure you tweeted about it, because you always do when you're reading something new.
Maybe.
So maybe he saw that and was like, "Oh, good, do that." I have not read it, so I would have to pick it up. But
it's rather on the simplistic side as far as how some of the events transpire. But my God, is it an entertaining read? It really and truly is. And there are certainly moments of brilliance throughout it. I honestly, my biggest gripe about it would be the artwork. Like, I wasn't crazy about the style of the artwork that was used for it, but it was so captivating. I mean, I scorched through, I think it was 12 or 13 issues for the first. They categorize them by years. Like, there's year 1, year 2, and whatnot. And I think there's like 12 or 13 issues in that first year. And I got through that in probably just under a week, which is very unusual for me, and keeping up with all of my other current reading as well anyway.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But yeah, I don't oppose it.
Yeah, I'm not opposed. As far as comparing him to other things, okay, so Batman, I would say, has a better butt than Nightwing, can eat more raw fish than the Penguin, and can walk better in heels than Batgirl.
All right, then.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, generally, the short answer is he's better at everything than everyone.
That's kind of where I'm sitting. I mean,
that's usually the case.
This is why,
at least if you ask a Batman fan,
the stories typically end with them in a jail cell and whatnot, as opposed to him being, "Oh, darn it, they got away."
Yeah, I mean, is he smarter than the Riddler? I think they're evenly matched, but that's the fun and the struggle of those two characters.
Right. It's got to be in the discussion, because Riddler comes up with this stuff and Batman's got to solve it.
Yeah. better fighter than Nightwing. I think that is fair because
there are some
trained Nightwing.
that swear up and down that it's not. In fact, I think it was James Tynion I think it was him. I'm not positive, but some writer made a list, and I'm pretty sure it was him, of the top 10 pure physical fighters, best fighters in the Batman universe. Mm-hmm. And I want to say like number 1 was Cassandra Orphan. And I want to say number 2 was Shiva, maybe.
Okay,
and then
that
number
makes sense.
3 was, I think number 3 was Grayson. And like Batman was like number 5 or 6 on this list, I think. I mean, he was down there. Like Damian was higher than Batman, I think.
What?
But I mean, even though he's a writer for the stuff, that doesn't mean he's what he says.
I know.
100%.
It can be, yeah. It can be whatever you want it to be. Yeah. So what else? I'm trying to think of what different villains or heroes' specialties are and how Batman stacks up. He's less of an asswipe than Damian. Does that count?
The only one my brain keeps going back to in almost every category is Deathstroke, which thank God we finally get to see some of that happen. And I think next month that kicks off the Batman versus Deathstroke arc. But you've got the fighting prowess, you've got the strategist, you've got the intelligence. I mean, everything on those two lines up pretty equally, although I'd say Deathstroke is probably faster and stronger just because of its abilities.
Yeah, I think Deathstroke does become a big part of the conversation because they're both master fighters, but Deathstroke is like an enhanced fighter. So in theory, Batman might not be an equal, but that's where Batman's ingenuity and cleverness come in.
Well, I'm curious to see how this is going to go down because to the best of my knowledge, and of course I haven't read everything, Batman still has never beaten him straight up face-to-face one-on-one. To my knowledge, Deathstroke's beaten him once or twice, and they fought to a draw once or twice. But I don't think, to my knowledge, if I'm wrong, you can at me about this one. I won't say don't at me about this one because I want to know. Has Batman ever beaten Deathstroke in a comic book? I don't think he has.
Straight up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that might change in the next couple months because that's coming.
Very cool. Interesting. So anyway, interesting question. I don't know if I have the right answer, but I mean, that's always Batman's challenge, right?
Yep.
So cool. Yeah. All right. Well, there you go. That is where we are going to wrap up the Wayne Manor mailbox. If you've got a message, send those to the same place you're sending your entries into the contest. Send those to holybatcast@rf4rm.com. And again, please do send us entries for a new intro for the Wayne Manor mailbox. Do that as well because it's so cool to hear what you guys come up with. I love what Chrissy came up with, even though it's not the best piece of Batman music ever. I still love what she did. But thank you guys for doing that. Please send those messages, please and thank you. Something else you can do if you would like to help us out is you can leave us reviews on iTunes. So as always, I'd like to read the last couple ones that we've got as a thank you to those who take the time out of their days to do it. It is quick and it's easy to leave us these reviews. It only takes a minute of your time and it does help us out. We're up to 239 reviews, which ain't that bad. That's pretty good. So this last one here is from Christian Shea Mark. It says, great show. It says, I love the positivity of the show and how often they pump out new episodes. One thing I love in podcasts is when the hosts make you feel a part of the conversation and it makes you feel less lonely. I also love how Jamie is open about being a Christian. P.S. Tim Drake is cool, but Nightwing needs more love on the show. I think he's the real and only heir to the cowl. Thanks, guys. Christian Shea Mark, thank you for the message. And all right, I hear the feedback. I love Nightwing. I love Dick Grayson. And if we're not giving him enough love, I think we can do better. I'm totally fine with focusing on that. And then we try to make you guys feel like a part of the conversation.
If he's the only true heir to the cowl, does that mean Terry McGinnis doesn't exist? Or?
Well, that's the thing is there are a lot of heirs to the cowl.
But he said there's only one true.
Well, it's opinions.
It's true. That's true. Everybody's got them.
It's opinions.
But I think I like Grayson as a character. I wish somebody would come up with better stuff for him in comics right now.
Oh, so one thing that came out of this, because we talked about this in the last episode, and you mentioned, Grayson's a great character, but his stories tend to not be as great as the character himself. And we had a lot of messages saying that the mid-90s run, the Chuck Dixon Nightwing run from the mid-90s is like the best Nightwing run. And it was the mid-90s. That was, again, when I wasn't reading a lot of comics, so hence why it wasn't something I came up with. But quite a few listeners tweeted and messaged that to us, and I was like, okay, that's great to know, because I will definitely check it out. If that's the quintessential Nightwing run, I do want to read it.
If you check it out and you say it is, I'll pick it up and then let's do a review on that.
Okay, great.
Deal. There, Nightwing content.
If the damn movie would happen, we'd have lots of Nightwing content.
I don't want to talk about that.
Anyway, and then this next review is from Clint Tubbs 3. It says, Batman would love to listen to this podcast.
He does.
Listen one.
I've got it on good authority. He does, in fact.
Yeah, it's we've got it on tape. It says, listen once, you'll be addicted. I subscribed to this podcast a few months ago and I haven't looked back. Each week I look forward to listening to new episodes and furthering my love for The Dark Knight. The hosts Andy and Jamie are true Batman fans and you'll appreciate their love and positivity when discussing the character. I highly recommend listening to this podcast if you are a fan of Batman or the DC world. You won't find anything better.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, wonderful. I love it, Clint. Thank you so much. And thank you to everybody who's left us a review. Again, if you haven't done that yet, please, just carve a little moment out of your day to do it. We would really be appreciative. But that is where we are going to wrap up this episode of Holy BatCast. So thank you guys so much for joining us. Jamie, thank you as always for taking time out of your busy Sunday to talk the Bat.
My busy Sunday where my daughters are selling Girl Scout cookies and my son is watching Pokemon episodes. So yeah, I'm covered up here.
Everybody's happy.
You got it.
And now I'm awake. Can you tell a difference between when we started and when we are now?
The coffee blood flow thing's happening. So yeah.
It happened. I'm sure people are following you, but in case they haven't yet, where can they follow you?
You can find me on the tweets at BatRaider3960, talking about all sorts of various nonsense from day to day.
There you go. And I already told you where to follow me, but thank you guys for downloading the show. Thank you for listening to the show. Please do subscribe to the show. Please leave us a review. And as Michael Keaton's Batman says, I want you to tell all your friends about me. Visit holybatcast.com. Like our Holy BatCast page on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter or on Instagram or on YouTube. Holy BatCast. If you've got a message for us, send that to holybatcast@rf4rm.com. But that's it for this episode. Thanks for joining us. We will see you next time. Same bat time, same bat channel.
Holy BatCast is brought to you by real fans for real movies. Remember, the thoughts and opinions shared by the participants are theirs and theirs alone, and do not represent the companies or organizations they happen to work for.
Yes, I think I'm going to be fine now. Thanks to you, Robin.
You knew it was me in the costume?
Does it matter? All that's important is that I'm myself again. I think the demons that have haunted me have finally been banished.
I figured all it would take would be the right kind of shock to snap you back to your senses. And it looks like I was right.
I'd like to be by myself for a while, if that's okay, chum. There are a lot of things I have to sort out for myself. A lot of choices I have to make. And in case I haven't mentioned it, old friend, thank you.
You're welcome, pal.